June 29th, here in the ancient town of Zhenyuan, Guizhou, the water level is rising, flooding the shops.
The once world-renowned ancient city, known for its green mountains and clear waters, has now trapped locals and tourists in a flood. For the tourists, this experience with the flood is likely to be very memorable. A woman living in a high-rise building shared her fear. Seeing the flood downstairs is terrifying. The flood has reached the streets and the elevator has stopped working. Just now, while climbing the stairs, I saw my neighbor with a big backpack saying they were leaving to stay elsewhere. Maybe I should do the same. Because I lacked safety awareness, I left my car parked in the underground garage and now it's flooded. Despite living on a higher floor, this woman could not escape the flood's impact. Her car in the basement was submerged, making it difficult to evacuate from the flood-affected area. Starting in June this year, many regions in southern China began experiencing severe floods, causing significant loss of life and property. Areas like Guangdong, Guangxi, Fujian, and Anhui have encountered floods that occur only once in a century. She County in Anhui suffered 2 floods within a week. Although the authorities cited extreme weather in southern China as the cause, rumors persist that the real culprits are sudden releases from reservoirs. Throughout June, natural disasters were frequent in China, with a trend of drought in the north and floods in the south. Guangxi and Guangdong were the most by the floods, which further spread to Fujian, Hunan, and Anhui in mid to late June. Recently, the flood impact has reached Hangzhou. Some videos of lake water flooding have been filmed and posted online by local residents. Netizens are exclaiming how heavy the rain is, saying that the water from the lakes has overflowed into the city. The videos show that many flood-affected areas have set up sandbags and barriers, using all possible flood prevention measures, but they still can't stop the continuously rising waters. On June 28th, the River Water Resources Commission reported that due to continuous rainfall, large floods occurred in several tributaries of the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River, including Dongting Lake and Poyang Lake. The water levels in these areas and the main river rapidly rose. The report mentioned that by 2 p.m. on the 28th, the water level in the mainstream of the Yangtze River at Zhejiang had reached 20 meters, which is the warning level. By 11 a.m. on the same day, the water level at Hukou Station on the mainstream of the Yangtze River had reached 19.52 meters, exceeding the warning level by 0.2 meters. This marked the first time since the water level exceeded the warning level during the year's flood season. At this point, the first flood of the Yangtze River in 2024 had formed. Moreover, reports indicate that in the next month, the middle and lower reaches of Yangtze River will continue to experience heavy rainfall. The main rain zone will be located near the western part of the Dongting Lake water system and the main stream of the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River. Due to the high intensity and long duration, the risk of flash floods, landslides, and urban waterlogging in the rain zone will increase, and the high water level situation in the main and tributary streams of the Yangtze River will persist. Prior to the 28th, in some parts of Chongqing along the Yangtze River had already experienced floods exceeding warning and guarantee levels. The Wuhan government in Hubei also issued a notice stating that from 3 a.m. to noon on the 28th, Wuhan would continue to experience heavy to torrential rain, with extremely heavy rain in some areas. The cumulative rainfall in Changqing Street Station in Dongxihu, Hankou, would reach 147.8 millimeters, the highest rainfall during the flood period. As of noon on the 28th, due to continuous rainfall, the water level at the Three Gorges Reservoir in the Yangtze River was 148.16 meters, with an outflow of 12,700 cubic meters per second, and the water level at Hankou Station was 25.83 meters, exceeding the 25-meter warning level. Out of Wuhan's 261 reservoirs, 15 had overflowed, an increase of 11 from 7 p.m. on the 27th. In response, at noon on the 28th, the Ministry of Water Resources issued a Level 3 warning for Anhui, Jiangxi, Hubei, and Hunan provinces. Therefore, in the coming days, and possibly even for the next month, the flood situation will only get worse. In this major flood, the most important concern is, of course, the condition of the affected people. In Meizhou's Pingyuan County, Guangdong, the extreme rainfall in 24 hours reached 369 millimeters. Many residents described the rain as unprecedented. A local villager mentioned that his ancestors had marked the house to show the highest flood level they had experienced, which was about 260 millimeters. However, in this flood, the water level reached 3 meters, a tenfold increase. So far, the floods and landslides caused by the heavy rain in Meizhou have resulted in 47 deaths. However, some locals believe that the actual number of deaths is much higher, as deeply flooded areas cannot be properly assessed. One resident shared surveillance footage from his doorstep. The video shows the view of his house's front door. At around 1 p.m. on June 16th, the door and the street were still visible, but by 3:30 p.m., the street was completely submerged and the door was halfway underwater. By 5:30 p.m., the door was entirely submerged. The resident who posted the video said, "Our front door is about 2 meters high. Within 3 hours, the floodwaters rose 2 meters. The Huangtian Reservoir near our house suddenly released water at noon, and we only received the evacuation notice at 3 p.m. By then, the flood in our village was already 2 meters deep, so we couldn't evacuate in time. The 38 deaths and 2 missing persons were entirely man-made disasters." The speed at which the flood arrived did not seem like it was due to the heavy rain slowly increasing. For residents in southern areas, like Guangdong, heavy or torrential rain is common during the summer, especially around typhoon season. Although summer rains are plentiful, severe disasters and significant loss of life were rarely heard of. Even with the heaviest rains, large-scale floods did not form so quickly, especially with today's advanced draining systems. In Guangxi's Guilin, which was also severely affected, the entire city was flooded. Local residents noticed the floodwaters rising rapidly and forcefully. Unlike a typical rain-induced flood, the flood was caused by the simultaneous release of water from 4 major reservoirs upstream, including Fujian and Qingshitan, which inundated Guilin. It can be said that the once-in-a-century floods these regions faced were likely not natural disasters, but man-made ones, closely tied to the numerous reservoirs built in China. Dr. Wang Weiluo, a well-known hydrology, environmental, and ecological issues expert living in Germany, explained the reasons for the significant losses in the flood. Speaking on NTD's Elite Forum, he said that information about water releases and many details about reservoirs in China are classified as state secrets. Guilin has experienced serious floods almost every year since 2020. Local residents do not know whether they live in a flood-prone area that experiences floods every 5, 10, 20, 50, or 100 years. People in Guilin and throughout China cannot access topographical maps of their areas. In the United States, such topographical maps are readily available online, but due to internet restrictions in China, citizens cannot access them. They have no idea about the terrain around their homes, can't see the elevation, and don't know if their area would flood in the event of heavy rains. These highly detailed maps are classified as state secrets in China, controlled by the General Staff Department, and not accessible to the public. As a result, the Chinese people are the biggest victims of the CCP's so-called secrecy protection laws. Moreover, the rising flood levels and other areas are largely due to the construction of so-called sponge cities. For instance, in Guilin, the left bank of the Li River used to be farmland, where water could flow through, flooding the fields. However, under Xi Jinping's initiative to develop sponge cities, urban development has prevented floodwaters from flowing away, intending to retain 70% of the rainfall in the city as a water resource. This sounds beneficial. It contradicts natural processes. As a result, 70% of the rainfall, including floodwaters, remains in the city. Dr. Wang Weiluo also mentioned that one of the main reasons for Guilin's severe flooding this time is that the Qingshitan Reservoir, one of the 4 main reservoirs upstream of Guilin, is classified as a dangerous reservoir. Qingshitan Reservoir is defined as a Category 3 reservoir, meaning it is unsafe and needs reconstruction. 4 reservoirs exacerbated this flood. According to the original design, Qingshitan Reservoir's flood discharge capacity is nearly 3,400 cubic meters per second, while the maximum flow measured downstream in Gui is about 5,000 cubic meters per second. This means that the majority of the floodwater was released from Qingshitan Reservoir. Due to its status as a dangerous reservoir, it couldn't store water during the flood, and its flood prevention function was not utilized. Meanwhile, residents erroneously believed that the large upstream reservoir would ensure their safety, leading to a misalignment in function and a significant man-made disaster in Guilin. The flooding in Meizhou, Guangdong, is related to the sudden nighttime release of water from 2 upstream reservoirs. One of the reservoirs, Changtan Reservoir in Jiangling County, has a capacity of 160 million cubic meters, while the other, Huangtian Reservoir in Pingyuan County, has a slightly smaller capacity of about 40 million cubic meters. According to netizens, the water levels rose rapidly, with some reporting a 6-meter rise within an hour, submerging houses up to the 2nd floor. Though the waters rose quickly, they also receded quickly the next day. The coordinated simultaneous release of water from the reservoirs caused significant harm downstream, which is undoubtedly a man-made disaster. The CCP attributed all deaths and property losses to natural disasters, which naturally incites public anger. Historically, China has always had issues with river flooding, particularly the Yellow River, but not the Yangtze River. The average flow rate of the Yangtze is 30,000 tons per second, 15 times that of the Yellow River. The Yangtze River's stability in the past was due to three main reasons. First, the water in the Yangtze is clear with low sediment content, keeping the riverbed stable. Second, the upstream vegetation was good, preventing severe soil erosion. Third, the Yangtze River had natural large-scale reservoirs, such as areas from the Dongting Lake to Poyang Lake, with vast low-lying wetlands. However, after the establishment of the People's Republic of China, the Yangtze River's flooding has become more severe. This is largely due to the loss of these natural reservoirs. Historically, the middle reaches of the Yangtze River, from Dongting Lake to Poyang Lake, were once called the Great Tse, or the Great Marshlands. These areas acted as natural regulators, absorbing excess water from the Yangtze during high flow periods and slowly releasing it during low flow periods. The natural system served as a massive flood control mechanism. However, if you look at the map now, you will find that there used to be many large and small lakes in Hubei, Hunan, Guangxi, and Anhui. These lakes, which were natural reservoirs for the Yangtze River, now have been filled to create farmland. This reduction in the natural reservoirs has greatly contributed to the frequent flooding of the lower Yangtze. Without these natural storage basins, excess water flow now goes directly into downstream rivers and cities. The flooding of the Yangtze is also related to the construction of upstream reservoirs. Each reservoir raises the local water table, so rainwater doesn't seep into the ground, but flows away directly, creating localized floods. Moreover, excessive development in various regions has led to soil erosion on the mountains, making floods even worse due to the lack of vegetation. When discussing the major floods of the Yangtze River, we must mention the Three Gorges Dam. The CCP has always promoted the dam's main advantage as flood control, but after its construction, floods have only gotten worse year after year. The Three Gorges Dam is the largest gravity dam on the Yangtze River. In simple terms, it's a concrete wall placed in the river valley to block upstream water, creating a reservoir. The idea is to release water when levels are high and store water when levels are low to supplement surrounding cities and prevent floods. However, no matter how strong the concrete wall is, if there are problems with the foundation, it won't hold. When the dam's reservoir level was at 145 meters, it held about 300 billion tons of water. By 2020, this level had increased to 165 meters, adding approximately 200 billion tons, and this year the volume is even higher, potentially doubling. This enormous weight puts tremendous pressure on the riverbed rocks below, potentially causing deformation and movement in the dam's foundation. As early as 2020, the CCP admitted that the Three Gorges Dam had issues with leakage and displacement. With the increased water volume, the pressure on the dam is even greater, and any problems will only become more severe. If the reservoir is overfilled and the dam collapses, downstream cities will inevitably be flooded. The CCP's frantic water release in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze may be an effort to protect the Three Gorges Dam. Before the construction of the Three Gorges Dam, Professor Huang Wanli of Tsinghua University consistently argued against its construction. During the war against Japan, he researched water conservancy in Sichuan and was familiar with the geological and river characteristics of these mountainous regions. He knew the local geology and hydrology were complex, but the government dismissed his concerns and proceeded with the dam. Professor Huang's opposition to the dam led him to be labeled as a rightist and persecuted by the CCP. However, time has proven him correct. He had also opposed the construction of the Sanmenxia Dam on the Yellow River, a project similar to the Three Gorges Dam. After the Sanmenxia Dam began storing water, it quickly silted up, rendering it useless. The dam couldn't function properly due to excessive silt accumulation, leading to wasted investment. The Three Gorges Dam follows a similar principle. Instead of alleviating the flood problem, it has become a burden during this flood. Although China has 100,000 reservoirs with a storage capacity that could hold the country's annual water consumption, floods are becoming more frequent. Currently, the 100,000 reservoirs in China not only fails to prevent floods, but may also act as ticking time bombs. The Russia-Ukraine war has shown how vulnerable reservoirs and dams are during conflicts. For example, the dam on the Dnieper River in Ukraine was bombed, causing severe impacts. Former U.S. President Donald Trump recently mentioned in a speech that if the CCP invades Taiwan during his tenure, he would bomb Beijing. The question is, what would he target? Looking back to 1969, Beijing first faced the threat of bombing from the Soviet Union. According to the reflections of Lin Biao, who was Mao Zedong's successor, he stood in front of a map for several days before pointing to the Miyun Reservoir, Guangxi Reservoir, and Huairou Reservoir in Beijing, saying that the Soviet army would bomb these three reservoirs. This highlights that in wartime, bombing the enemy's reservoirs can be a decisive blow. If these reservoirs were to collapse, the resulting floods would directly inundate all of Beijing. For the CCP government, constructing numerous reservoirs fulfilled their grandiose wish to triumph over nature, but it also placed 100,000 potential catastrophes over the heads of the people. The CCP benefits from building these reservoirs, while the drawbacks and risks are shouldered by the Chinese people.